Winner of 8 Academy Awards and literally one of the greatest movies ever made, Amadeus was released 40 years ago.
I am working on something that is going to explode like a bombshell all over Europe.
My heart was filling up with such hatred for that man. For the first time in my life, I began to know really violent thoughts.
The director has actually torn up a huge section of my music. They say I have to rewrite the opera.
Papa? You have pupils? I don't want pupils.
I have to have time for composition.
Composition doesn't pay.
How are we supposed to live, Wolfie?
It's odd. A little modesty. It might suit you better.
He never leaves the house till evening.
Really?
I think you really are going mad.
Herr Mozart, I have come to commission work from you.
What work?
A Mass for the Dead.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this Friday morning with me here in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So there are certain movies throughout the glorious, sometimes not so glorious, history of cinema. There are certain movies where the reality, sadly, is less than the reputation, or where you see a shit ton of Oscars next to the name of a certain film, and when you actually get around to watching it, you say, is that all there is? This won Best Picture over, something that you like better. Then there are those movies that have the hardware that history tells us were highly acclaimed in their day, got the hardware, and you get around to watching them and your expectations are blown the fuck away because the film is even better than you ever imagined. There aren't that many films that I would put in that category, historically speaking, where I was not old enough to have seen it when it came out and I caught up to it later and the film far exceeded expectations. Well, one of those movies turned 40 years old yesterday. Released on September 19th, 1984, Milos Forman's extraordinary adaptation of Peter Shaffer's, well, it was a stage play, but I assume it was also a musical, Amadeus. Amadeus ended up winning 8 Oscars in the year where David Lean, anytime David Lean worked, David Lean was always the man, had a film, Passage to India, which many people were expecting, because it was David Lean, was going to do what he did with Bridge on the River Kwai almost 3 decades prior and win all the major awards, which was not to be because Amadeus landed and most of the major critics and most of the movers and shakers in Hollywood were beyond flabbergasted at just how great the movie was. And this is a film that exists in 2 versions, and you can readily find either of them on streaming. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think Apple, but Amazon Prime has the theatrical cut, which everyone saw, and a so-called director's cut, but I don't know if what they call the director's cut, if Milos Forman came forward and said, yeah, this is my preferred cut, because when I hear director's cut, it means preferred cut. It means something with the imprimatur of the filmmaker, but not released by the studio. And we saw it with James Cameron, with Aliens, his director's cut, his preferred cut was the longer cut, where Ripley had left a daughter behind before she went into hypersleep and the whole thing. So I don't know if it's actually a director's cut or just a longer version of the film. I have seen both. They are both 10 out of 10. Slightly different experience, but 10 out of 10 nevertheless. Now, before I watched Amadeus for the first time, I didn't see it, again, for shame, I didn't see it in full till probably the mid-1990s, even though this was a film that came out in 1984 and had a very unusual scenario where 2 of its leads, the 2 leads you could say, F. Murray Abraham, who plays Maestro Salieri, and Tom Hulce, who plays Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, were both nominated for Best Actor. I will say, I love what Tom Hulce does here, and he's terrific in a lot of other movies. He's a fucking riot in the Ron Howard film Parenthood from 1989, where Steve Martin plays his older brother. Rick Moranis also plays brother. He is hysterical. And Tom Hulce is great in this film. And if were it not for his co-star, I could easily have seen him walking away with the Best Actor award, but his co-star, the formidable, to this day, F. Murray Abraham, gives what I believe is a top 10 greatest performance in the history of cinema as Antonio or Antonin. Either way, Maestro Salieri. It is a master class in film acting from his first appearance to his last. And the film is filtered through his perception. Because although the movie is called Amadeus, it's more of Salieri's story, and we take his position more often than you expect to. F. Murray Abraham has moments in this film that are beyond extraordinary. There's a moment, and this is as much on Milos Forman for just knowing that this would work, because it's not going to sound that great. So basically, Salieri is a successful composer. He's a court composer. He literally works for Emperor Joseph, played by the now notorious but terrific actor Jeffrey Jones. Well, there it is. So he is successful, and Mozart has achieved a certain level of success. And the two men know each other. They don't know each other particularly well as the film opens, but they know of each other, and certainly they know of one another's work. And it's, what is it, the 17th, 18th century? It's not like they're getting together and making TikToks, you know? It's different when you say that somebody knows somebody all those years ago. So Salieri is a talented composer, but he also knows something that most normal people don't. People who just listen to music because it sounds good and it's entertaining and maybe it's peaceful and calming, whatever the case might be. He knows that although he and Mozart are in the same business, they are in the business of making music. They are not in any way comparable. Salieri is, in the immortal words of Rocky Balboa, Salieri is a ham and egger. He's a guy that can make music, but he's nothing like Mozart. Mozart is so far beyond him. It takes another composer to understand just how great Mozart really is. And so there is this one moment in the film, and this is not a spoiler, where Mozart's bride comes to visit Salieri to try to get a job, because Mozart, he burns through money very quickly, and he writes so much, he does so much work, but he can sometimes be a little unfocused. He's so brilliant, he might be working on 6 or 7 different things at once instead of something he is actually being paid for. So she visits Salieri, and she doesn't know if there's any contentiousness between her husband and herself. She visits him, and she says, I would like to, she finds of a job offering with the king. Can you give my husband a little bit of help, or can I show you some of his work? Maybe you can study it. So they come to an agreement, even though Salieri is pretty busy. He said, let me have some of your husband's work. I will protect it. No funny business. He doesn't say no funny business, but he's trying to calm her down. No one's going to steal his work. This is very serious. I understand what you're doing. If you trust it with me, I will get back to you. So she gives him some of Mozart's work. And for a person who's not thinking in terms of, well, this many hundred years ago, they didn't have typewriters with edit functions. There's no word processor. You write something out longhand. There are going to be errors on every page. There's going to be mistakes on every line. The way that F. Murray Abraham's face changes as he looks at Mozart's work, as the music comes to life on the soundtrack, he becomes increasingly agitated, incredulous. He's somewhere between I believe in God and fuck Mozart. And it is all on F. Murray Abraham's face. And it is like, it's 2 minutes of film acting that is beyond what you can imagine. I'm not even coming close to doing justice to just how brilliant he is here. And I can't think of another actor that would have been able to do what he does just in this one scene. He's good enough to understand this guy is better than anyone, probably better than Beethoven, although they were completely different kinds of composers. But when he is looking at the work, he realizes that not only is every musical accompaniment within the piece written out, you use an oboe here and a second bass here, everything is written out. There is not a single mistake. There is not even the slightest markup. There's nothing other than beautiful music written in painstaking detail. And the way that he says it, it's like he's taking dictation from God. This can't be. Number one, there's no way that a normal person could write music this good. And the fact there is not a single error. There's no correction. There's nothing. Well, this process forms a major portion of Salieri's through line. Why would God give all of this talent to him, the creature, and not me? I'm pious. I am faithful. I have taken a vow of celibacy. This guy is hooking up and he's screwing around. He's drinking booze. Why hast thou forsaken me? Because somebody has to know just how great Mozart is. Tag, you're it. So the story operates on a lot of different levels in terms of what Mozart is trying to accomplish, what Salieri is trying to do in his schemings, and does he really want to hurt Mozart or not? We're not really sure. But the film contains Mozart's greatest works, whether it's The Marriage of Figaro or whether it's the famous Requiem, which was very dark. It is wall-to-wall, unbelievable music. And you can watch this film in surround sound and forget about the story and just take in how much of a genius this guy was. It's okay to say these things. It's okay to say, I just selfishly want to hear the music in Dolby Surround or whatever. I don't really give a shit about the story. But the story is incredible. And all of the kind of demons that Salieri has and the things that consume Mozart, who is a very lighthearted individual. He is somebody who loves to laugh, loves to screw around with people, make jokes, and have fun. When it's time to work, he can buckle down just like anybody else. But it would be, and it is, when you know, if somebody like myself, I know enough about writing, I've had enough tiny little bits of success to understand that there are people who might technically say the same thing if you meet them. What are you? You're a writer. We might both be writers, but that's where the similarities end. When I read Bruce Joel Rubin's original screenplay for Jacob's Ladder, I knew that I could not do that. That is not reachable for me. I can write a script within the same kind of genre. I could maybe make it interesting, make it scary, make it a good read, but I can't do what he did here. That's on a whole nother level entirely. When I read Richard LaGravenace's The Fisher King, I just recently talked about that movie on the channel. I knew I can't do this. I can maybe do something approaching it, but I'm not going to be able to get this depth of feeling, and it seems to come easy to this guy. Just as Bruce Joel Rubin wrote Jacob's Ladder, by his own words, in a fever dream, almost as if he needed his fingers to keep up with how fast his brain was moving. Well, that's one of Salieri's main points of contention with Mozart. It'll take Salieri weeks of very meticulous work with a shit ton of mistakes just to produce a couple of minutes worth of music, which, if we're being honest, is nowhere near anything that Mozart would come up with. And this son of a bitch, it's already written. The music is already in his head. He's not creating. It is as if it is being dictated by God. And there is that sense of spirituality. Not so much of life and afterlife, but spirituality and the sense of the beauty of music as if from the heavens. For a long movie, it never flags in either version. And the main differences in the two versions, again, this is not spoiler territory. The actress Elizabeth Berridge, who plays Stanzi or Constance, that is Mozart's bride. In the original version, she has a couple of moments where she seems to become frustrated with Salieri, because Salieri and Mozart appear to have a bit of a rapprochement because they have some contentious bits between them. It's more that Salieri has a problem with Mozart than the other way around. Mozart knows Salieri's not that good of a composer. But there's a moment near the end of the theatrical cut where Stanzi seems to lose patience very quickly and almost wants Salieri to get the fuck out of our place. And you say to yourself, well, she doesn't know what he's been trying to plan. Why is she talking to him in such a kind of a harsh manner? Well, the original version of it, there's more with them, and there's more of Salieri seeming to degrade her and not behave in a very pious manner around her. And so that's why she's more than a little bit salty in the final portions of the film when they have their, when they have their communication, as Mozart is attempting to, continue to write as he's really just not feeling well. And one thing that the movie does, without kind of belaboring the point, this is where it gets tricky, because sometimes there are components of the story that are just kind of off screen, or that we get an idea of something, but it's not the primary thrust. And in this movie, Mozart does not eat well. Even though Stanzi cooks for him and prepares food, he seems to survive on a lot of alcohol. And you might argue that it's not anything other than the fact that he takes such poor care of himself, that he is somebody who will fuck around all day. He'll play billiards, he'll go out, he'll giggle and do his shtick, but then he might work for 28 hours straight. Again, this is not a lazy person. His process might be bizarre, but when it's time to work, he will work himself to death. And there is something tragic when a person has a level of creativity that is probably, they can't explain it to someone else, why they must do what they do. About 25 and a half years ago, I'll never forget receiving word in April of 1999 that Stanley Kubrick had passed away. To me, Stanley Kubrick is the Mozart, the Amadeus of cinema. He is somebody whose level of ability, whose talent was not, you can't even compare him to anybody else. You could say that some of the shot making of Christopher Nolan is comparable, no problem. But I believe that if you just look at his IQ, Stanley Kubrick allegedly had an IQ the same as Marie Curie and Albert Einstein and J. Robert Oppenheimer. He was not a normal, brilliant person. He was at a different level. And that's why his movies don't feel like the films of any other person who ever worked in the business. Stanley Kubrick was 69, I think, going on 70 when he passed. Maybe he had just turned 70. The first report that came out was that he had died of natural causes. Now, Stanley Kubrick, as far as we knew, did not have a heart condition. He had no previous instances of any kind of neurological disturbances, nothing. You're not supposed to die of natural causes at that age. You're not. Especially somebody who appeared to, at least on the surface, not have a lot of health problems. The word was that Stanley worked himself to death. That he was so feverish in terms of editing a cut of Eyes Wide Shut so he could show it to his stars, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, and Sidney Pollack as well, and presumably the studio, that he got the fever, so to speak, and he couldn't stop working. And then when he finished it, he died. No spoilers, but think about what I just said and transpose it to the world of the movie Amadeus. Even a very young man, you don't have unlimited life force. And if you don't take care of yourself, it makes a tragic event that much more likely. Because the human body, the human spirit, can only take so much without a recharge. Amadeus, though, for all of that, for all of the moments of seriousness, I cannot overstate just how much fun this movie is. How purely enjoyable an experience it is to watch the film. It is not a stately, stuffy, dull period piece. And two of the opening scenes, there's a scene set in I guess it's supposed to be some kind of a sanitarium with an older Salieri telling his story. But just the look of the food, it doesn't matter how many 100 years ago this is supposed to be, the food in this film, you want to pause. You want to do a Last Action Hero and enter the movie just so you could eat some of this unbelievably appetizing looking food. The film, though, is incredibly entertaining. It doesn't matter that a lot of characters speak in their perfect clipped British accents or other European accents. And you say to yourself, well, this is supposed to be German. There's no German accent. You just go with it. You don't need any trickery like Hunt for Red October, where Sean Connery and Sam Neill are speaking Russian, and then all of a sudden they're speaking English so that we understand what they're saying. That movie did it in a very clever way. We just kind of go along with it. I think of Tom Hulse, the way his character, he's very deferential for all of the goofiness. He knows his place. But at the same time, he has a keen understanding of just how good he is and how much work in his own way has gone into what he does. There's one extraordinary moment, it's probably Jeffrey Jones's finest moment in the film as Emperor Joseph, where he puts on an opera. I think it might be Marriage of Figaro, I'm not sure. And when it's over, Mozart very clearly is fishing for compliments from his king, or the king. I don't know if it's his king, I think he's Austrian by birth. He's fishing for compliments, and the king is complimenting him, but then he says, sometimes it just feels like there's too many notes. And Mozart is aghast. We just sat here for 3 hours. That's what you've got? There's too many notes? I used only the notes I required, sire. No more, no less. Well, your work is ingenious, dear boy. It's very good. And there are simply too many notes. Just cut a few and it'll be perfect. The look on Tom Hulse's face could have won him an Oscar because he knows this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But he's the king. He's the one who commissioned the work. No, thank you. Keep your mouth shut, kid, if you ever want to work again. Suck it up. You know he's full of shit. It's really great film acting. Hulse has a very expressive face, as does F. Murray. Although it would be hard-pressed to name two actors who look less like one another. But they both have such expressive faces and get to put it to good use throughout the running time of this film. Now, I know that Amadeus had a run on Netflix, at least here in the States. I think it was 2023, but it could have been before that. As of right now, I don't think it's free on any streaming service. I could be wrong about that. Also, I want to point out, the film was only a modest hit at the box office. I think it grossed under 3 times its production cost. And given the widespread acclaim and the fact this film had incredible word of mouth, and I guarantee you this, if you've never seen it, you ask people in your social circle or family, friends, parents, grandparents, whoever, anyone who has seen it will say the following: that movie is incredible. Holy shit, what a great movie. Are you in for a treat? You've never seen it? Oh my God, what a movie. You don't find anybody nowadays that is not completely dazzled by what Milos Forman was able to do, getting the cast together. You know, he, in a supporting role, he got a human cheat code in Simon Callow. Simon Callow, every movie he's in is fantastic. 4 Weddings and a Funeral, he's the highlight of the film. Shakespeare in Love, he's a fucking scream. He's great in this movie. He is a cheat code in human form. Unbelievable. But Amadeus, whether theatrical cut or director's cut. The movies are both, 2 hours and 40 minutes or 3 hours. It's not going to be a short film no matter how you slice it. But Amadeus, released 40 years ago yesterday on September 19, 1984, winner of 8 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for the extraordinary F. Murray Abraham. It is an absolute must-see film, and you will like it even more than you ever imagined. I will go down on that hill, and if you watch it and I'm wrong, you can light me up in the comments. It's all good. This has been episode 311 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.